So today's topic is body positivity. And I thought to bring Bernadette on because we had a couple of conversations. Well, it all started because I noticed that she had buttons on her bag and there were all these very like body positive buttons. And I thought, oh shit, like she's like really representing this idea that I know actually very little about. Like I know about it in kind of like a cursory way, but yeah, that's the extent of it. And so I thought we would bring Bernadette on. Can you do you know by memory the different buttons that you have on your bag?
Yeah, I made them myself. So yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to find buttons that had the things I wanted to say and they didn't really exist. So I made them myself. I got the little button, crusher thing and made them.
I love that. Yeah.
So yeah, one is 97% of all diets fail. So that's a statistics that's over like 3 to 5 years. So like long-term weight loss over a long period of time. And then one of the other ones is without fat, we wouldn't have booty. Right? And then, of course, I had to give boobs a nod too. So I did the same thing with boobs. And then I have one on there. It's not exactly about body positivity, but it's from Dr. Jen Gunther, who wrote the Vagina Bible, and she's amazing. And one of her little sayings in her book, which I just love, is your vagina is a self-cleaning oven. So I'm just like, I love it. And it is about, your body too. So it's all those kinds of things that I have on my bag. And the reason I put them on there was because I wanted other people who maybe feel like they don't fit in the mold to see those and think, see, it's okay. Like I can just be myself. Because I know that things like that help me too.
Yeah. And I love the mentioning of the vagina quote.
Yeah.
Because that's actually something that like there some people do have shame around their like genitalia, like be it a guy or whatever someone's genitalia is, that there are. I didn't realize that this was an issue with like vaginas until I saw this book, and it was like all vaginas are beautiful, and it was like a bunch of pages, and I was like, oh wow, like this is like an example of like my not knowing what might be happening for like a certain group of people.
Well, it's not your experience, so it makes sense.
It's not my experience. But I love that. I love that as like an incorporation, that it isn't just like the stuff that people can see. It can also be the stuff that some people can't see.
Yeah. Only a select few get to see that.
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
It depends on who you are.
There's nothing wrong with if you let a lot of people see.
Yeah, some people that is their moneymaker.
Hey.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Maybe that should be a series.
Yeah.
We'll get back to that.
Yeah,
so
we'll get back to that.
So like I said, I have a cursory understanding of like body positivity. So can you tell us a little bit about like what it means to you and like how that's developed over time?
Sure. So I think a big shift for me was when I moved because I've been in the Bay Area my whole life, but I moved into the city of San Francisco about 8 years ago.
Okay.
And I moved because my entire life changed, my relationship imploded, everything changed, and I basically changed everything. So I had to start from scratch. And I remember thinking like, I am so tired, sick and tired of fighting against this body that is here to stay. Like I am done trying to put my curvy little ass into a size 10 jeans. It's not going to happen. And you know what, if it does, it's going to not be because I did it. It's like, it's not going to be something I consciously did. It's like, this is my body. This is how it is. This is what I've been fighting against and doing yo-yo diets my whole life. And I'm not doing it anymore. By the way, yo-yo diets are awful for your body, just FYI. And so I just had this moment of clarity, almost like the clarity that I had when I first got sober. It's like, I'm not going to try and fight against what my body is and how it exists in this world anymore. I'm done doing that. And so I started following all these body positive people on Instagram. I bought, several books about body positivity and body acceptance, and just sort of immersed myself in that thought process. And it took some time, because even immersing myself in those thoughts and relating to a lot of the things I was reading, it was still really difficult to unlearn all of the commentary that is everywhere, social media, magazines, TV, that tells you, especially as a woman, I know as a man too, you know, there are expectations as a man, but as a woman, we're like supposed to be this like tall blonde, size 0, big boobs, you know, doesn't matter if they're fake, like, you know, just you're supposed to fit this mold. And I'm never going to fit that mold. And the one time I got close enough to that sort of mold was when I was doing extreme dieting. And I wasn't eating sugar or flour. I was only eating a certain amount every day. And who can sustain that? No one can. That's why diets don't work, because it only lasts for as long as you do it on the regular, you know? And I just don't think that's very sustainable.
Do you have there's so many rich things here. Do you have an opinion about these medications that are becoming really popular, like Ozempic?
Too.
Yeah. You know, I just saw something about that today, and I have heard about it, and it, you know, it's something that I have thought about, and it's sort of intriguing, but also I don't want to think that there's like this silver bullet. There's like this one thing that's just going to solve all of it, because body positivity and body neutrality is so much bigger than that. You know, it's, if you want to change your body, that's fine. That's your choice. And if you want to take some of these meds, that's absolutely fine. And you know what? I'm not anti the meds, like, but I just don't know enough about them to feel like that's something that I would want to do for myself. And particularly because now that I've gotten the knee surgery, hopefully that will mean that I'll be able to walk more and do more and be out and just be active. And I think for me, it's, my body acceptance is really about feeling strong and feeling self-sustained. It's not about what size I am. It's about, you know, the strength of my body and what I can do with it.
I love that. Yeah. And you're making me think about, like, there's a difference between like what it means to be, well, first off, thank you for all of that. I mean, there's so many different things that we can talk about, and hopefully we'll get to all of them, or at least most of them. But I love this idea of like not fighting what is, right? That like a person can be beautiful in whatever body that they're in, and that a person can accept their body in no matter what body they're in. And there's also this difference between like healthy versus like what's appealing to other people, right? Like, which is, I think, what you're getting at. Like, to feel strong, for example, is a very different barometer than, oh, like I am now looking like the example you gave was like the blonde,
size 0, you know,
size 0, like that kind of person. And I wanted to say a little bit too about how that might apply to men, which is really interesting, because the pressure has been on women like since, you know, the beginning of time, you know. And you know, within like the last maybe 10 or 15 years, maybe even more than that, there has been like this like slow objectification of male bodies, especially I think with gay men. Like, I think if you look at gay media in particular, and you know, and to support this idea of it being around like gay men, you have, you know, having eating disorders among gay men are actually quite high, right? And it's in either direction. It's either like getting on steroids and going in that direction, or like under eating, etc. Louis, did you have something?
No, I'm just listening.
Yeah. So, and you know, I think, and there's so many different factors that contribute to that, right? So, what do you think are like where do you think the different messages come from?
I mean, for me, I just remember as a young girl, my experience was, you know, before we sort of had the internet explosion and social media, it was just standing in line in the grocery store and looking at the magazines, all the magazines, right? And I remember thinking to myself, God, can't there be one magazine with a woman that looks like me, or a young girl that looks like me, who's chubby and curvy and is like sort of a tomboy? Can't there just be one magazine like that? And there never was, you know, for the longest time. And it was just the same sort of woman over and over. And I just think that that image has just been seared into my mind, and seared into so many people's minds of like, this is the ideal. And, you know, only I think something like maybe like 1% to 5% of women actually have that body type that they could even achieve that goal. And so it's just, I think that for me was the place that it really started. And I think it's different for everyone, especially with, technology moving so fast. It's like with social media, I know that there's a lot of teenage depression about like feeling insecure about their bodies and thinking they should look a certain way, and all these filters that people are putting on them that make them look like they're not even people, and feeling that like that's how they should really look, so it changes, I think, every generation. But that for me was really where it started.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much. So, there's one of the, I don't want to lose our momentum, but I realized we never asked you our 3 questions.
Oh yeah, I know. I thought about that.
But I don't want to lose our momentum around the media. So let's just go to the 3 questions just quickly. Because it's just 3 minutes for 3 questions. Go
honestly, in what you talked about, she kind of answered some of it. So it's like, it'll just be like a reiteration.
Yeah. So the first one is, where are you from?
Okay, so Bay Area. I've been in California my whole life. I grew up in the, white suburbs, a little bit south from here. Very old, very white. That was my youth, and didn't really feel like I fit in there a lot of the time either. So yeah, and then I moved here, like I said, about 8 years ago to San Francisco itself.
Nice.
Oh, cool. And
yeah,
what brought you kicking and screaming to recovery?
Okay. The short and sweet answer of that is my parents were a freaking mess. They were both addicts and alcoholics. They showed me the life that I never ever wanted.
Yeah.
And I resisted and resisted and resisted. And then when I turned 18, like some kid told me, some like cocky boy told me, this teenage boy told me, you're going to flip a switch one day and that's going to be all gone. And it was true. It was like, flip the switch and I was just off and running. So I think, the resistance and then seeing the life that my parents had created and just not wanting my life to be like that, and seeing very clearly, if I didn't change something, this was going to be it. This is going to be like my little tunnel life. It was going to be just getting loaded. Nothing else matters until the end of time, until I was done, and I didn't want that.
Yeah.
Nice. You want to ask the last one?
No.
What's your relationship with your higher power?
Oh man, that's been a hard one from the start. I mean, not to get into too many details, but I grew up in a Italian Catholic family. Catholicism has its wonderful points. It also has some awful points, in my opinion. And, growing up with this sort of punishing God, and then also being queer and being, sort of outside of that because of that, and asking questions that never really got answered to my satisfaction, sort of created this really difficult resentment in me with religion and spirituality. But over the last 20 years of recovery, I've really learned a lot, and I've changed how I think about higher power now. And for me, like, my higher power is more about the power of nature and the power of like the ocean. I can go to the beach and just watch the ocean for, an hour and feel so much peace because it's out of my hands. I can't do it. I don't make the waves. I don't make the gravity that makes the waves. Like, it's not my job. And so I think there's something really freeing about that, and yeah, so that's sort of where I'm at with it now. It's very different than when I first came in.
I love that. So let's go back to social media. So, and like media in general. So I can relate to this. I can remember when I was a young boy, all I saw as models of excellence were like blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guys. And I can remember thinking to myself, I can remember I went through this period where I absolutely hated myself because I was like, I don't look like that. My hair doesn't look like that. My skin doesn't look like that. And then I remember when I came out and I was looking at like all the gay media, and to some extent, this still exists this way too, where it's like what you see are a lot of white bodies, right? This kind of like sexualization and idealization of white bodies. And then when I have seen like bodies of color featured, it's always been like the exception. It's always been like it's fetishized in some way, right?
Absolutely.
you know. And so like that's one of the, so body positivity and like body acceptance and self-acceptance, it took me a very long time to get around to like, oh, actually no, I don't have to look like this thing in order to love myself or to feel valuable, etc.
I think that's something we should definitely talk about before we end this conversation. There are folks who are so uncomfortable with this idea of body positivity that they push against it.
Yeah, what do you
mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think about like the way people react to the Lizzo. Was out there her thing or whatever, and there are people are like, this is unacceptable, and they try to approach it from this really kind of from a health stance. Like, well, why are you celebrating this? Because this is not healthy. This is whatever, and not saying that, hey, it's more important. And this is like when you were sharing, Bernadette, I was thinking this idea of resistance is futile. It's like I am not making any effort to go to the gym or to do whatever. And so I had to get to a place where I loved what was going on here, because I also believe that it does not matter if I go to the gym and all of a sudden I exercise, my body looks the way I want it to look. If I'm not right up here with it,
100%
does not matter. So it's like when you're talking about the times when we looked like we thought we were supposed to look, I was miserable. I was not happy. There was no joy in my life. And so I've got to figure out how do I balance these two. And I'm closer than I've been in a long time with it, because it's like I feel like all of a sudden, once I let go of trying to look or feel like I think other people wanted me to feel, and I'm just happy with what's going on, and I'm in acceptance about where I'm at and where I'm supposed to be at. Like my body is kind of getting in line. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's great.
Could we go back to this idea of like unlearning? So what are maybe some of the things that y'all have had to unlearn for a little bit?
LouLou, do you want to start, or are you asking me that, Anthony?
Both of you.
Yeah, I think having to unlearn this, like we talked about the stereotypical being of who I think I should be, and having to really sort of throw that idea away. And when I see things now that are advertisements about, losing weight, getting on a diet, getting on the treadmill, all the things we do to punish our bodies because we think we should be a certain way, those are all the things that I'm trying to just remove from my sight, remove from my mind, remove it from my Instagram feed. If I get an ad on Instagram that says, oh, you can do lazy girl yoga, and it's like this fat girl, and then all of a sudden she's thin, I'm like reporting that ad. Fuck that ad. I don't need that ad. Don't tell me that I can do lazy girl yoga. It's like the only the fat girl's going to do the lazy girl yoga. No, like I resent that, And so it's like those kinds of things. Like I have been actively complaining to the creators, to the advertisers. I'm like, this is not okay, And so it's like, I don't want those advertisers to cement those ideas even more in our minds that we are not okay, that we need to be different than we are. It's like we already have enough pressure. We don't need those advertisers giving us more pressure. But of course they're going to, because they're trying to make money.
That's right.
I mean, the diet industry is insanely rich. Rich.
Yeah.
I do the same thing that you do. It's like I'm all about curating what I see. Because for me, like because of the things that I do, it's like it benefits me to be on social media in the way that I am, because I can use it as a way to reach folks that I wouldn't be able to reach. I still need to decide what it is that I want to see. Like I will go through and I will actively, and it's not that I'm trying to kind of keep everything at bay, because there's still some things that, I want to be challenged, but there's, like you said, it's like, I don't need to see this. I'm not interested in seeing this. But I was going to point out, I've told this story before. It's like, I remember one day I was getting out of the shower and I wiped, it's all dramatic. And I wiped the condensation off the mirror and I looked and I thought to myself, like, Louis, are you judging yourself as not desirable based on your skin, your color, being a black man? And I realized in that, it's like, I need to stop judging. I need to block all of that out. I'm letting all of these images that are coming at me, I'm letting what they're telling me is desirable, determine what I think is desirable. I need to get away from that. And some of the little litmus things that I do is I I think about, and this is a tough one. This is a tough one. Sometimes I focus so much on what's not happening that I forget to pay attention to what's happening. That, it's like when you're in a situation you think nobody wants you, but you don't pay attention to the people that you've already turned down. It's like, oh my God, this and that, or whatever. It's like you're only concerned about the people that didn't want you, but you're not paying attention to the fact that you, like 50% of the guys and we were talking about the sex club, but you were in a situation where all of a sudden it's like you're only paying attention to those few guys that said no, but you've had your hand up and nobody is getting in, and you're not counting those. And I have to, for me, the way that I stay sane is I'm like, oh, so not everybody's, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and it's okay. And in the same breath, they're not my cup of tea, and maybe I'll find what I need to find. But it's like, that's just what I was thinking.
Yeah, what this is, just a while ago. So what comes up for me around this is, you and I, we know someone who, they're an older gentleman, and the long and the short of it is that his self-esteem was being really shot. Like, he's older, his body has changed significantly, and he had all this low self-esteem. And then what ended up happening is that he had sexual encounters with guys who were significantly younger than him, than he is, and it was more than one. And then that somehow then impacted his self-esteem. And there's something about that feels problematic to me. This idea that the self-esteem is reliant on whether or not you're fuckable, like just to be frank, that. And what was interesting about that to me is that, like, what was coming up for me as I was listening to him was that self-acceptance was available to him even before he had sex with those guys, right? That a person can feel good about themselves, and it doesn't matter whether or not you are physically useful to someone else. And by use, and I'm putting it like delicately, right? And I think the other thing that's kind of maddening is that beauty standards change over time.
They do,
which is also very crazy to me, which is crazy making, because beauty standards change.
You do all that work to get to that one beauty standard, and all of a sudden it's like,
and then it's different. I
mean, like, during the Renaissance, like, it was in vogue to look older, right? Renaissance. During the 1800s, it was in vogue to be in a bigger body, because and even during the Renaissance, because it communicated wealth. It meant that you didn't have to work, right? And so, and it had to do with what people lacked, right? And so if people lacked the money to buy food, well, then they were thinner, and so they were not as attractive, right? It's an illusion, for example, that there are these kind of universal concepts of beauty. I remember I did research on this like years ago as an undergrad, and there are actually very few universal standards of beauty, and the ones that do exist, they're related to health, right? And so, for example, like complexion. Basically anything that communicates like I don't have diseases is like considered like a universal thing. So, like, for example, like a clearer complexion, and it's not even like some abnormal complexion, it's just like the standard human face, right? Like anything that like doesn't look like communicating like some type of disease. So they're very, actually, like I said, very few universal things, and of the things are kind of like everyone would just kind of like shrug their shoulders and say, well, yeah, of course, no one's going to be attracted to someone who's throwing up, right? Like,
right. I hope not.
Well, it's probably a kink. I probably just shamed someone's kink.
I'm sorry if we yucked your
exactly.
But the takeaway here is that beauty standards, they shift over time, and nothing is kind of like set in stone. And that I think by itself is actually quite liberating to consider.
Definitely.
Yeah, did I just cut you
off?
I
just wanted to add on to what LouLou said. I as a white person, I have no idea what it's like to be in a darker skinned body. And I know that there's been moments where I thought, okay, I'm going to do this like litmus test. I'm going to Google search beauty. What comes up? 95% white blonde women. So it's like even that, you know, the lack of diversity in the women's color, and then on top of that in their bodies, and there were no men that came up. Beauty didn't even define men as part of it, you know? So it's like there are still so many factors that we could be way more inclusive about when it comes to quote unquote beauty. And I do find that, you know, more media is including more people of color, more body types. There's still a lot that's lacking though, too, you know, and there's a lot of representation that isn't there. So I think it's something else to consider.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you should bring up marketing and beauty, because you know what? So I have an MS in applied psych, and one of the things that I learned when I was learning marketing is that there's nothing, no human body is more marketable than a woman's body.
Mm-hmm.
Like women's bodies, you can use to sell things to other women. You can use women's bodies to sell things to men. You can use women's bodies to sell things to children, right? Because the ideas of like comfort and nurture, right? So there's and you know, and so the objectification of women's bodies is still very clear. And then I think that was the only. Oh, and then the other thing is that marketing in general, like the goal of all marketing essentially is to create a feeling of lack, right? It's like you lack this thing, like, you know what I mean? It's like you're unhappy until you're in this body. You're unhappy until you have this material thing. So there's nothing, I think I might have said this before, there's nothing more anti-capitalist or anti-capitalist than self-love and self-acceptance, right? Because if there's truly self-love and there's self-acceptance, there's no need to like take an extra thing. Like there's no need to really kind of consume extra things, right? But so with the last 10 minutes that we have, I want to talk about what are ways, like not practical tips necessarily, but what are ways that you cultivate self-acceptance and body positivity?
Well, I mean, I think, like I talked about already, I surround myself with, you know, media that I find is helpful and comforting. And there are women out there that look like me, and there are women out there that don't look like me, but it's like we are all sort of fighting that same battle against this sort of norm. And so I think that that's helpful, is to surround yourself with people who have similar thought processes as you know, have this mindset that there's no one right or wrong body, and to discuss that with other people and to help other people to discover that in themselves and to think about it themselves. Because I think it's really, it's become sort of part of our, almost like our DNA, to question ourselves and to feel insecure and to feel like we're not fitting into some certain mold. And so even talking to other people about this and thinking and asking them why they think that about themselves, and to get them to question, oh, why do I think that? Who's putting those thoughts in my head? You know, and I think that helps other people gain clarity too. And it becomes more of a understanding in a community. And it's not just like a few people here and there that are saying these things. So I find that to be really helpful. And like, you know, I made the pins. I looked for pins that I wanted and they didn't exist. So I made them myself, you know, and some people have really liked them and asked me if they could have one. And I was like, here you go, have it. Like, go, you know, like enjoy it. So, you know, just any little thing like that you can do, or that I can do for my own self-acceptance and love. You know, it's not always easy to have self-love, you know, and I know when people say self-love, you know, we can all get a little immature about it in our heads, but really, it's really about just loving who we are, right? And so, but sometimes we're not there yet. Sometimes we need just self-acceptance. Sometimes we just need to feel neutral about our bodies and not say anything bad about it, you know? And that's a good place to start, you know? So I think there's a lot you can do. I mean, I could talk about this forever, but there are a lot of things you can do. I think really it comes down to deciding that you're worth it and that you are worthy of self-acceptance, and go from there.
Absolutely. I think that recovery has helped me so much in that I think for me, getting honest about how I feel and sharing that with someone, not letting shame around how I feel and guilt about feelings, whatever, but really kind of talking about it openly and honestly with, and like you said, like there are times surrounding myself with all of these different bodies, different types of bodies, and because I have been more inspired, motivated. Like when I meet someone who I've met people who, in my mind, don't fit the idea, but they have this confidence and they have this strength and they have this and I'm like, what the hell? what where's that coming from? I want some of that.
Mhm. And you can have it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, you absolutely can. Everyone can. And I think
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the beauty industry and the diet industry's worst fear is that people will start saying, I don't need all this crap to feel good about myself. And they're going to just start losing money. You know, like, could you imagine a world without beauty products and diets? I mean, my God, what would that world be like?
Right.
I was thinking it's like when I'm with my family, I was thinking it's like I complain about my weight and this and that or whatever, and I'm with my family, and they're like, "You need to eat something. What's going on?" It's like you're this, that, whatever. It's
You
like,
never
no.
win. Yeah.
No, exactly.
I know.
Well, I heard a share the other day that really blew my mind. There was a person who he was talking about how, oh, I think you were there for this. He was talking about how when he first got sober, that like he didn't feel very attractive. He felt like his life was falling apart. And then as he like started working out and his body started to change and he started to get all of these things, people were going up to him and telling him how beautiful and how wonderful he was. And one of the things he said was, I needed that shit when I wasn't where I am right now. That I didn't need someone to tell me that I was beautiful and I was valuable. I needed that when I wasn't feeling those things. And what I took away from that was that he was inherently valuable, that he was inherently beautiful. And so that has made me change how I think about how I'm showing up for people. Specifically, like I have a no comment, like as a general rule, I don't comment on people's bodies. I don't care if you lost weight or gained weight. I don't comment on people's bodies for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons why I don't do it is because I don't want to like reinforce a narrative that I don't agree with. So for example, like I have a friend who's lost a lot of weight. Like I don't praise that person for losing weight, like
I'm working on that.
you know what I mean?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I have to remind myself too.
Yeah. And so, it gets tricky too, because, I do think that like with my partner, for example, like, I tell him he's beautiful all the time. You know what I mean? Or if he like walks into the room and he's like naked, I might comment on some part of his body, but that to me feels very different. I don't know why I feel that.
That to me feels very personal.
Well, it's sexy. It's fun. It's fun.
Well, you know what I mean? I mean, like, what do you do? Like, if you're with your partner, you don't comment, you don't like praise your partner's body. I don't know. I just, and I don't care what body he's in. Like, it doesn't matter, but the point is that I think he's beautiful.
I just like messing with you.
Yeah, you do. You're a bitch. You. So,
yeah, well, and I think what's interesting,
we're going to talk about positive attitudes.
I won't be here. I'm going to be sick.
I'm going to be sick that day. Okay, LouLou.
And the other thing I like too is that that the conversation isn't limited to bodies, right? Like physical shape of bodies. It could be about height or like a nose or skin or race, right? Like that it applies to body positivity has to do with so many more things than just a person's weight or the shape of their body.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I was thinking about here was, at least for me, and I got this from recovery, was esteemable acts, right? Like I feel the best about myself when I'm doing things that have nothing to fucking do with me. Right.
Yeah.
And like, be it I'm helping someone like with their resume, or I'm sitting across a client. It looks like we might have a comment.
We have a comment.
Oh,
Anka.
Don't forget Aging Bodies. Hi, Anka.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes, Anka. Yes, 100%. That's a whole other thing, right? Which is like the way when people age, how they become like invisible in the media. It's so fucked up. I mean, there have been some really cool things that I saw done with that. Like there's those like the older fashionistas.
Yeah.
There was like
Yes, I've been
Yeah,
seeing those more and more.
yeah, and and I feel like part of that is very unique to maybe not unique to the United States, but I know there are other countries, for example, where like they treat their elderly a lot better than we do, or like just older folks in general a lot better than we do. I think Dove even had a campaign for a while where they were doing that. So go ahead. What were you saying?
Oh, I just wanted to say too, because we were talking a bit about validation from outside sources.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part for me that has shifted a lot is that I have to constantly remind myself to look inside for validation. Don't look to other people. Don't think that my boss is going to give me a big old pat on the back for doing my job. No, I'm the one who needs to say, you know what? You did a really good job today. Or, you know what? You showed up for that and it was hard and you did it anyway. It's like, we have to become our own loving parents because a lot of us didn't get that, right? And so our critics are so loud and they feed into that insecurity. And so if we can like center ourselves and come back and say, I did a really good job, I am proud of myself, then all the other stuff doesn't matter because we've got that strength, and that strength makes confidence, and that confidence is so damn sexy, as we know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right?
Another like, I think that it also, in addition to that, is like surrounding yourself with folks who are not negative. Like we were joking, like there are some folks who, like, whether they know it or not, that's how they show up. And like for me, it's like it's bad enough, like if I'm telling myself that I don't need outside external forces reinforcing that. So it's like, come on, I have to lovingly love people. Like I was talking to my sponsor about this. I have to lovingly love people from across the street because that's, it's like, I don't have the bandwidth. I can't. So I'm going to just let you do your thing over there. Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add is that, and it's so important that when a person is feeling in their power, right? Like when a person is feeling good about themselves, that it's not at the expense of other people.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I feel like that's one of my issues with some types of drag where like like there's the kind of like elegant, glorious drag queen, and now she's putting down everyone in her path.
Yeah. I think that's the reason why that I'm so loved, because I come for myself first, and then I come for everybody else.
Well, I mean, it's an art to like make fun, but for them to also be in on the joke, that's like
what happens loving.
Yeah,
like I've always said, and this is the last thing I'll say. Like I think that like for me, it has always been like, I am not going to attack something that I know is really an issue with you. It should be light and airy, and also we should have that relationship. Because if you just walk in the door, I've never met you or whatever, and I come for you, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's my issue, and I got to work through that.
Yeah, I think this is a quote I came across when I was again a teenager. It was something along the lines of like, true strength and true power is to have your own and not feel like you have to take it from other people, right? Like that is real strength, is when it's not like at the expense of everyone else.